Well, welcome everyone to today's podcast for the real stories, real people, real life. Our guest today is a philanthropist, business owner, songwriter, but anyone who sees this will know he is one of Australia's wildest acts on stage. He entertains everybody. Welcome to the show, Adam Thompson.
Rob, it's good to be here and a long time coming, but as we promised, we'll make it happen.
We will make it happen. As most people who listen into our podcast or watch it, they know that this is all about the story behind the story. Most people know you as the front man of Chocolate Starfish, but there was something before that. I heard you grew up about a half an hour north of Shepparton in Victoria.
I did, and I was born in a little country town called New which is
Yes.
about another half an hour south of the border, New South Wales border, and born in the New Base Hospital, and then lived on a farm up until I was about 18 at midpoint between the two in a place called Tallygaroopna. And when they talk about one-horse towns, they pretty much write the postcard over Tallygaroopna. It's a tiny little town,
Yeah.
but a great place to have grown up and a great place to have, I guess, developed some grounding and some value set.
So I've been through the Goulburn Valley. There's more than one type of farm down that way as it goes across into South Australia. What type of farm was the family on?
So it was a dairy farm, and it was in our farming family for at least 120 years.
Wow.
That block of land, and it was, I guess my great grandfather's before my grandfather, and it was a dry land before that, and then it became agriculture with irrigation.
Yep.
And that's when they got into dairy. When
Yeah.
I guess in the beginning, dairy was relatively lucrative, and you could make a reasonable living off it, and that's what my dad went into.
Mm.
And as a as a farm boy of my early and teenage years,
Yep.
plenty of nights looking after the cows when Dad had to go off to a meeting and play.
Yeah.
In fact, I still have dreams about it, Rob. It's really quite funny. There was this. I'm segueing right now, but there was
That's okay.
this one moment where you have to flush out the pipes basically in a
Yes.
milking shed with some chemicals, and then you start milking, uh, and you have to remember to put the hose back into the vat so that the milk tanker could come and take it away. And I remember a couple of times when I was midway through the milking the cows and realizing that I hadn't put the hose back into the vat, and
Oh no.
all the milk was running down. So the farm cats had a great day that day.
And how did you explain that to your father?
Well, he knew that it wasn't exactly my calling to be a farmer. I think he pretty much took a look at me and some of the outfits that even I wore back in those days. And
Yeah.
but it was one of those things that I did for the good of the family, and yeah, he accepted it.
Were you more a sporting kid or were you more an academic kid?
Definitely more of a sporting kid, and um, in fact, I've started doing on social media this thing called Sunday salutes,
Mm.
and so every Sunday I do a salute to somebody in my life that has helped shape the
Mm.
person I am, and sometimes that can be a single moment in life that you hear a message of inspiration, and other
Yep.
times it can be a relationship over several years. And anyway, this week I did my basketball coach in the under 17s, and he was a brash, fast-talking American that taught me a lot about life during those early years of basketball, which was the sport that I was most passionate about.
So what did you do when you left school?
So when I finished year 12,
Mm.
I went year 11 and 12 were difficult years because my mum passed at
Yep.
year 11, and so I changed schools, and they always talk about sliding doors moments, and I changed schools because I knew I was gonna, if I tried to do year 12 in the high school that had so many memories and so many challenges in, that I was going to fail because I only
Yep.
jumped up through year 11. Went on to the different high school, and it happened to have a drama program. you know,
All right.
which my first school for the first 5 years of high school didn't have. And
Yeah.
so it was in that year 12 year that I discovered performing, and I discovered drama and acting, and I guess it planted a bit of a seed that when I went on to uni 2 years later at
Mm.
Deakin, uh, and I literally answered an ad in the Geelong Advertiser that said "Singer
Yep.
Wanted," and I thought,
Yes.
well, hang on a second, I've sung in the West Side Story chorus in year 12. Surely that equates Singer Wanted. And I thought it'd be like a wedding reception band.
Yeah.
And the guy, when I turned up, he said, "No, it's actually I'm a songwriter." And he said, "I don't sing great." And he said, "I need someone to help me write the songs."
Yep.
I was nearly going to, be truthful and say West Side Story, behind a cyclone fence making shapes doesn't really cut it.
Yeah.
And he said, "Mate, you're the only person who's applied for the ad, and I've spent $100. Would you mind writing a song with me and see what happens?" And I did, and quit uni the next week, and 10 years later had an ARIA award with
Did you?
and Australian Music Awards for the
Yeah.
most popular act. So
Did you? You remember what that song was called? Your first ever?
not at all. and you would think that I would. You think it would have such a profound effect, but it was not so much the song itself, but more what it enabled me to realize that songwriting all of a sudden became a cathartic tool that I could use to, I guess, express what I was feeling about any given moment,
Mm.
and help me work through some of the issues that I'd had since the passing of my mum and my sister and a couple other, sort of tragedies in my life back
Mm.
in the teenage years. So it became a really important tool, and to be honest, it still is today.
A good mate of mine's also a songwriter and a performer, and he said songwriting is a gift. It's not something can really be. You can go to school, you can go to here and be taught the basics of
Mhm.
how to write a song, how to do a bridge, how to do all that. But a true songwriter, it's a gift. How would you agree with him on that?
I would agree and I disagree.
Okay.
Only because a large part of my last 15 years is actually been teaching groups of people how to co-write a song around, either
Mm.
in an Aboriginal community. We do a lot of work in it
Yep.
around a social issue that needs exploring,
Which is
uh,
music's fantastic for.
which is great for,
Yeah.
or it could be in a corporate company that we do lots of tuning teams as the
Yep.
product, and I guess bringing their mission statement to life. But I'd also agree with you in the other side of the coin. It sounds like I'm on the fence here, but I think the really special songs, the ones that, and I always equate that I don't know where some of these ideas come from lyrically, melodically. I think they
Mm.
come from a place, much higher than me. And sometimes if I'm given the gift of a message or a line, and I reflect back on it and go, where the hell did that come from? That's
Yeah.
no influence of mine. That's nothing I've ever experienced, but all of a sudden there might be three or four words in a melody together that I've never heard before, and I know it's the basis to a new
Yeah.
song.
So your first half of the band time is in leading up to Chocolate Starfish, and then with all of that.
Mm.
When you first started out, I know when I was a young fella, my parents you had pubs, and I used to stand as a little fella to the side of the band, and I could watch all the bands for nothing because I was the manager's son. But they all used to say one thing when I used to talk to them. They said it was a hard slog. They loved it. They didn't make any money because they either drank most of it or spent it on petrol to get to the gig. Before you actually uh, had success, how hard of a slog was it going in? Because, I mean, to be honest, anyone that reads up about you and knows you, Chocolate Starfish themselves had the reputation of being one of the most hardworking, gigging bands. You would go anywhere.
Mm.
And that was before you were a big hit. Was it
Yeah,
as tough as they say?
look, it
I mean,
definitely
an
was.
overnight success in 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. And look, you've opened a can of worms there that we could probably do a whole different podcast on,
Yes,
but
we could.
it's about where the industry currently sits, and
Mm,
talking about the hard slog. But um, I guess what you've got to realise is that when I answered that ad back in Geelong, that was like 83, and it was
mm,
1993 when we put out
mm.
you're surveying. So
Yeah.
that's a 10-year period with a lot of bands that, I call them, the nilly bands. They nearly
Yeah.
got there, and no matter what your field of pursuit is, there's a lot of moments that are nearly, but I think they make up the capacity of what you have when you are given that one opportunity or two opportunities to really make a difference. You've had those inverted commas failures, and you've had
Mm.
those struggles and those down moments. So the 10 years even before Starfish were just as hard of a slog with different lineups and different you know band names, etc. But as they were for all the other members of Chocolate
Mm.
Starfish, we all had similar challenges. And it's a cliche, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger,
Yeah.
as you would know. And I look at the way the industry is now, and I'm only just going to do a touch point on this.
Yeah.
It was being able to tour incessantly. It was being in pubs where the sound meter would blow the first time and for the people listening to this who are under 35, they're going to go, what's a sound meter? Yeah, well, a sound meter is basically this machine that, dampens your sound, that if you're too over a certain decibel, the whole power would cut out for 2 or 3 minutes. So many times during the Starfish period,
It was.
we'd be in the middle of the very first intro to the very first song, and we'd blow the sound meter, and I'd have two options: walk off stage like a prima donna and wait till it came back on, or I'd jump out in the crowd and keep them engaged. And so that's when I learnt so many of the tricks of the trade that I have today, where it doesn't matter what situation you put
Yeah.
me. I know how to entertain.
In the early years, what was the fuel that kept you going? I mean, you would have done gigs where there would have been 20 people. You would have done gigs when there was hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah. Look,
Before you got that big success with that and Mountain and Four Letter Word, what was it that kept you going?
so had you asked me this question back in the 90s, I would have said, the desire to be successful at my craft was my
Mm.
driving force. But if I'm answering it truthfully today,
Yeah.
in my 50s, after having done a lot of psychology work on myself and my battles with mental health,
Yeah.
I realised now that my driving factor was actually my mum's passing. And
Really?
yeah, so, and this was only in the last few years that I've realised this, is that there was like a latent feeling inside that mum passed when she was 37.
Mm.
Okay, so she never got the chance to really live any of her dreams or her goals. So there was um, this sub narrative beneath me that was almost doing it as much for her as it was for me. So yes, I
Mm.
wanted to make something of myself, of
Yep.
course, but I also wanted to make her proud. I also wanted to, um, I guess, do some of the risks, some of the challenges that a 37-year-old farm girl never got a chance to do.
So, what was it like inside the first time you had a good sized crowd and they started singing your song back to you?
Let's see that still. In fact, if you can actually see, I've actually got the goosebumps now. It evokes still almost every sense in me. So it evokes a
Yeah.
memory, of course, but it evokes smell. I can actually smell the full crowd singing with and condensation dripping off the
Yeah.
ceiling of this pub in Geelong, um, and you can hear the sounds, and you can you can see the faces of people that somehow you've reached them. You've created something. You've created not just a band, but you've created songs that are resonating with people, and they're understanding the melody and the message as passionately as what you were when you wrote it. But in
Yeah.
some instances, even more so.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. The band took a break, but I'm
Yeah.
sure you didn't. During those years there, where before you reformed in 2013, what was Adam doing?
Ooh, Adam was doing so much. So when I say we took a break from each other,
Yeah.
and it was, I guess it was overdue. Myself and Zoran, my co-writer. He was the
Mm.
guitarist in the band. He passed
Yeah.
away not long after 2013, actually.
Yeah.
And so it was just sort of when we we're getting back together again, and he passed away from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma,
Yeah.
excuse me. And so we took the break because, I guess, I personally needed to understand more about my own capacity in this
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about, wanting those pivotal moments where you can discover more about yourself. But I had this overwhelming thing that, yes, I'd been successful in rock and roll to a certain point, but I knew that I was greater than the sum of just that.
Yeah.
And there was this overwhelming altruistic streak in me that was coming through. The more I read, the more I, started to understand that I wasn't the same person I was when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
There was a new Adam Thompson emerging, and I guess for him to go back to Chocolate Starfish and reacquaint with the guys, it couldn't be as the 25-year-old guy that was into sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Yeah.
It was more about what's the sum of my personality, and so I did a lot of sabbaticals to international countries, and
Mm.
lived out with the Maasai in Kenya for a bit, and but it was all to really understand who I was, and how I wanted to live the rest of my life, and I guess start to develop some new tools, mate, that could see me through that next phase or phases of my existence.
So is that when you found meditation,
Uh,
or the beginnings of it?
the
Yeah.
beginnings of through a girlfriend. And I must say it was very much only the beginnings of, because if I again
Mm.
truthfully now, I was probably more into the meditation so I could be with her than what I was with the actual feeling of meditation. But it was actually around about 2008 when I really experienced proper meditation through my
Mm.
guru in India, a bloke called Sri Ravi Shankar, who runs the Art of Living, and it's
Yeah.
an interesting. It's a non-religious meditation and breathing program that I found to be the most, I guess, the most calming and the most constant. Whenever things get a little bit overwhelming, that's the one I can lean back on, and it's awesome. Yeah, it's just great.
Now, calming and constant isn't something that most people that see you from the outside the stage think of you. But before we get into that and the comeback and what you do now, uh, I was looking at you going. I've been privileged to meet a lot of artists, a lot of performers, a lot of people that go on stage of any form, and many of them are different person off stage to on stage. On stage, they feel quite safe, and they'll do things on stage in a good way, then they will never ever do off stage. Do you see that a lot in your fellow performers?
I do, and again, that's another huge can of worms that could almost be its own podcast.
Yeah, it could.
We and to equate back to what I was just talking about, um, we all as performers, have a comfort zone, and usually
Mm-hmm.
usually for many that is the stage, right?
Yeah,
And had I not challenged myself to other domains and other experiences, that probably would have been me as well, where, outside the stage, talk to my manager, etc., etc. But I've realised that it's a little bit limiting, particularly as you age. It's almost like, and this is where I think, older performers who have never had more laconic um, experiences outside their bubble
yes.
are really missing out. They're really missing out. Like when I go and sit in the dirt in an Aboriginal community after writing a song with the
Mm.
kids on, scabies, let's
Yeah,
say, um, that is such a vulnerable moment for anyone, right? But let alone someone who's, lived their life, in a public domain, a
Mm,
public face. But it's also something now that makes me more complete, and that's the only way
yeah.
I can describe it. It completes me. Every new experience I have that is outside the bubble
Yes.
is another thing that completes my tapestry, as to
Yeah.
quote Carol King,
I think a lot of performers don't realize that the audience aren't as dumb as they think. And I've sat at some of the concerts that you're performed at, and I'm not
Yes.
certainly not talking about you guys, and I have watched people on stage and many other concerts and public speaking and all that, and you know when someone's invested in the show and you know when they're just going through the motions. And the crowd picks up on it very, very quickly. And
Yes.
you can tell. I mean, we're not musos. I'm certainly not a muso. I was an old roadie, and that's why, because I couldn't sing or play an instrument. But you knew if you're on stage or behind stage, if the act was on or not, and the crowd picks that up. If we
Mm.
fast forward, I remember we were looking at an advertisement in the was a local paper on the net, and it came up Red Hot Summer Tour, and I looked
Mm.
down the list, and of course down I think it was first or second band was Chocolate Starfish, and my wife went, "Weren't they a band somewhere in the '90s?" I said, "Yeah, they were awesome." She went, "Oh," and we were going. And I think it was probably your first or second gig when you came back into the onto that thing, and we sat there and we didn't even pay attention to the late when who was on when and what. And all of a sudden, we heard this noise on stage, and it was the whole crowd. Like there was only probably a couple hundred people down the front, and all of a sudden, someone turned around, and you guys had just exploded onto the stage in your normal quiet fashion,
Mm.
and the crowd of 5,000 just shifted, and they all started running towards the stage
Mm.
because you guys had come on. Because when you see a good band that comes on and they can play good, it gets their imagination. And you started with one of your hits, and the place just went absolutely mad. Now, I've seen you do it there. I've seen you do it at the Enmore Theatre when you did Bohemian Rhapsody. So I have been asked to ask you this question. How do you get yourself in that state to be able to walk on stage and deliver? I mean, not everyone can do it, but
Mm.
I've seen you many, many times. And I don't think I've seen you, and I'm not saying this for the sake of it, I don't think I've ever seen you guys not put on a good show.
Mm.
It's not easy just to flick the switch. Even when you've had a bad day, you've got to walk out on stage and people expect Adam and the whole band to be on. How do you do it?
Well, it's if it was your wife who asked the question, which I hope, well, no, I'm not sure who asked the question for you to
It
ask,
was my
but
wife, yes.
it was your wife. Well, Mrs. Elliot, it is a very, very hard thing, and it takes an incredible amount of energy, and it doesn't end when the last encore finishes either.
No.
So I talk about recently my struggles with anxiety and depression.
Yep.
I put myself in such a state of readiness, and it's such a build up that it takes me 5 hours to come down, and I'm not exaggerating.
No.
So
Yeah.
if I walk off stage at 11 um, without drugs, or any downers,
Yes.
I would be lucky to be asleep by 4 a.m. when
Yeah.
the rest of the crowd has gone to sleep. So how do I flip the switch on? It's a set of processes. I
Mm.
run. I do a lot of vocal warm ups. But I also mentally meditate as well. So
Yeah.
I get myself in that zone, so that I almost imagine what the crowd's going to be like. I almost will them, if you want,
Yeah. Yeah.
to come on this journey with me. But I think layered over that is the intent of which it comes from. And you
Yeah.
mentioned it before about if a band are just dialing it in, and they're there for the money, they're there,
Yeah.
whatever, you feel it. And overarchingly, when I walk on stage, I have to come from a place of love, that I want that crowd to have the best night of their life. Now, whether they do or not, I'm kind of powerless, But if I can give them every bit of energy I've got,
Yes.
for 90% of those people, it ends up being the best night they've ever had because they can feel that emotion coming from me.
Yeah, it's a question I ask everyone. Doesn't matter what field they're in. There are times when you've got to walk on stage. I know when I've emceed and you've had an average day, you've got to be in state because people expect you to do it and
Yes.
walk on. Uh, I noticed. I remember I was at the gig when Vanessa Amorosi played her first gig back in Australia after being overseas, and I heard later that she was incredibly nervous and she was a little worried because she wouldn't know. She didn't know if people would still remember her.
Mm,
And I think she got through to her third song and the crowd started to sing back. And as you were talking before, and she got emotional on stage.
mm.
And it was emotion for a good way. When you guys came back, did you go through the same journey?
Yes. So we it was amazing. We got on to the Red Hot Summer Tour in 2013, and
Yeah,
Zoran was just around still, but I think
yeah,
he was not well, and I wasn't sure of how I'd
yeah,
perform. I knew I
yeah,
had all the other skills and all these other ways of being, but I probably wasn't match fit. I wasn't physically fit, and we went on, and probably similar to what Vanessa experienced. The very first gig, it was actually overwhelming how much the crowd switched on.
yeah,
And then inside, I went, oh shit, I've now got to do this for the next 15 shows, right?
yeah,
And they've got to be better than the last one.
yeah,
So by the time I got to the last one, and this is where anxiety can be, and your own vision, which you've got to balance, you talk
yeah.
about balance. Um, I was so worked up that I hadn't slept for 4 days before the last show at
Ouch.
Jacob's Well.
Yeah,
So in my history, I've never cancelled a show except for that one. And it was just, it was our comeback. It was like the last show of the tour, but I had to cancel. I literally I was very unwell. But when we got back on Red Hot Summer Tour last year and did it again, and we went back to Jake as well, and I've got a lot more, again,
mm,
things in my toolbox that help me deal with this now.
yep,
I made that announcement, really openly and vulnerably to the crowd that I
yeah,
had to blow this out 5 years ago. Um, but thank you for waiting, and thank you for being part of our lives in the meantime. And man, the response from the crowd was something I've never heard before. There was just this overwhelming, spontaneous applause, because I guess I just opened up my heart even further, and that's what every performer should do. They
yeah.
should.
I think crowds are a very good barometer. And when you're open and honest with them, it doesn't matter if your crowd can be someone you're going to see to sell a product to or
Mm.
the person that you're serving at Woolworths. It's all the same. You're open and honest. They do pick it up.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other reasons I did ask you to come on the show is because you're more than just a performer. Part of your life is being a bit of a philanthropist, and you've got something called Music Manic.
Muso Magic.
Muso Magic, yes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that because that's just not all about the corporate side. There's a bit of a soft side to you in that as well
Yeah.
that a lot
Well,
of people don't know. So,
Muso Magic's the parent company. It's a big beast, actually.
yeah,
So it's got lots of arms to it. We started off, working in high schools for the disadvantaged kids
yeah,
back around 2000. And it started actually when the very first year that they put Australian Idol on TV, and I just literally I froze with this, and kids were crying, and there was all those classic
yeah,
balls,
yeah,
and I thought, my God, that is just not why I create. That's not why I perform. It's not about judgment. It's not about being in the top 20 or the top 100. It's about what this creative sphere can give me. I've got to design something that's the opposite to that. So
yeah,
I did, and I designed something that was all inclusive for creativity for people that have never done it before, but know that there's, and like every single one of us, know that there's a bit of a story inside us, and
yeah,
if we contribute to the greater good. So it started with schools. Not long after that, went out to Aboriginal communities, and
yep,
where we still work even today, for the last 20 years, we've been helping Indigenous kids and communities
Mm.
write their story around social issues, and it can be anything from cyberbullying all the way
Mm.
through to like heart disease, rheumatic heart disease, for example. And then I, and then of course went over to India as well. So that's
Yeah.
another big passion of mine. We've got a music
Yes.
academy in Mumbai where we've got a young couple who look after kids from the slum areas, and
Yep.
give the through our charity, give which is called Music Karma. So that's
Yes.
one of the arms. So Music Karma is the charity.
Yes.
Teams in Tune is the corporate side,
Yep.
and Empower is the youth program that is for schools and featuring peer mentoring.
So first, I'll go with on the corporate side. Have you ever been in a situation where the corporate stiffs, as many call them, just find it hard to open up and embrace the music side of it, to relax and
Yeah. So they find it hard every time. I mean, every single time it's a challenge. And
yeah.
with the corporate side, we rarely tell them what they're going into. So with the core team of the HR department, we just label it a team engagement day,
Mm.
and they turn up because this is what adults like. And something around the age of 15, when we reach puberty, we start to get all insecure. And
Yes.
the whole, am I good enough? Will this be good enough?
Mm.
Where will I be pigeonholed? Which is the premise of that whole reality TV stuff. And if I don't allow them to build up a brick wall before they come to the workshop,
Yep.
I've got them, right?
Yeah.
Once they're in the room with me and I get them to make a commitment to me in the first 5 minutes to trust the journey, trust the process, right? Put your phone away, right?
Yes.
Right? Because you don't need it right now. You've been given dispensation from your company.
Mm.
Yeah, you got 3 hours with me, and in this 3 hours, we're going to write an anthem, we're going to sing it, we're going to act it, we're going to design the film clip, blah, blah, blah. And mostly they doubt that it's possible. That's the
Yeah.
first thing. Yeah. And then, you know, part B of that is if you let them know beforehand, they would find every excuse under the sun as to why they shouldn't be there.
So true. So true.
Yeah. But if they walk in and just allow me to, and that's the magic
Yeah.
part, and that's my gift. And I'm actually designing it online as we speak, designing how I can help companies with their leadership presence own their stage, own their video conference,
Wow.
own their capacity to relate to their audience. And that's this, like what you and I are working
Yeah.
on right now. This is our stage
Yes, it is.
for as long as we don't know, right?
Yes.
So it's not just a passing fad now. This is going to be our stage for quite some time. So we better get good at it.
Look, there's so many guys I've interviewed, corporate people at corporate events. They can't do public speaking. They get it in their mind they can't. But they'll sit on stage with me on a chair and I can lead them down the garden path if I so choose.
Yes.
And then I walk off on stage and say, you just did public speaking. And they just break into a sweat. When you go to the Indigenous communities, what's something you've learnt from them when you've been teaching and talking to the kids about music?
Oh, wow. Um, the greatest thing that I've learnt from Indigenous communities is listening. And it's the greatest gift that I've been given.
Yep.
We as Westerners expect an answer straight away from our conversation. We expect, dead air is almost the enemy, and
Yes.
um, but there's an energy that comes from silence that, which I believe, if you, I'm not talking religion here, but if you talk about, the Big Bang coming from nothing, I think also these sparks of creativity emanate from silence.
Yeah.
So what they've taught me, and God, I've been in moments. I'll give you one now where I was with an Aboriginal family, literally cooking witchetty grubs out under
Mm.
the tea trees,
Yep.
and we're having a laugh and talking about things, and all of a sudden, and I'm sure all the listeners will have seen this when they've seen kangaroos. It was this instant, and it was this pause for about, and the two women and the guy, and they
Yeah.
just froze and looked off in a direction, and froze for about 20 seconds,
Yeah.
and came back and said, "We got to go." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Kadacha man. He won't get you, but he's going to get Aboriginal people. We got to go." So all three simultaneously felt
Wow.
felt the spirit of the
Yeah.
Kadacha man, right? And it was like when kangaroos hear a sound and the
Yes.
whole mob stops. So what Aboriginal people have taught me in every circumstance is the answer will come, but let it be considered more than just a knee-jerk response.
Oh, wow.
Let it
That's awesome.
let it come, and it will always come.
Yes, it
But
will.
but usually people just, and we've seen
Hmm.
the other degree where people just incessantly don't stop talking, and half the time without any fabric to their conversation. But Indigenous communities have taught me to listen and just to pause.
Wow. And so, what does your charity do?
So Music Karma basically picks up where Muso Magic leaves off. So when we do these programs, we identify people with a vision and a goal that don't have
Yeah.
the means
Yes.
to live it.
Yep.
So, for example, and India's been a big part of that as well. So the young people that work over there for us are from slum backgrounds, and
Mm.
the Indigenous side of things here. I've got a young man in Bright. He's on scholarship from his community up in the top end of Australia, up near
Mm.
Darwin, and he's living in Bright, teaching that language, Muran Pata, to
Mm.
Bright High School, and our scholarship to him because his best mate died in a drowning accident.
Yep.
His scholarship from us to him is teaching him logic and how to be a producer, so that when he goes back to community, he's going to be able to not just run our programs on key messages, but he's going to be able, as a traditional owner, capture the stories of the land that the white fellas are not meant to hear,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So he'll have the capacity to capture those stories from the elders, keep them in vaults that only
Yes.
traditional
Yeah.
owners have record of, and the language and the stories and the song lines won't be lost
Yeah,
because
that's awesome because it doesn't
yeah.
matter whose history or what history. A mate of mine who's a songwriter once said, every time grandma dies, a bit of history dies with her. There's
That's
always something that's not passed on. And I think that, Indigenous history, history from all over the country, doesn't matter where it's from, should be kept good, bad, indifferent. We need to know exactly what happened before us. We need to know where things came from and why and how people think.
absolutely,
I think
yeah.
that's absolutely awesome, mate.
So our TV show that's on NITV, it's called
Mm.
Outback Tracks, and
Yep.
it's not only is it the songs and videos created by the kids, but we've got these segments, and they're all around positive messaging, not just for Indigenous but for everyone. So
Yeah.
there's a segment called Mob on the Job, and our host Mitch Tambo is actually you might know of Mitch. He did that version of You're the Voice in language.
Yeah. I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's our host on that show, and he follows everyone from council workers all the way through to guys who are bank tellers, all about what they had to do for their job,
Yeah.
why it's important, what they've learned. So it sort of demystifies the steps for a lot of young kids who
Yeah.
then relate to it a lot more.
So if today's Adam Thompson went back to Geelong and he looked up and there was the 20-year-old Adam Thompson
Mm.
just starting out on his journey, and he walked down and he went, "Hello, Mr. Thompson, how are you? I've been told to come and say hello."
Uh,
And you're standing there, resplendent in your red kilt and all that, looking up at him.
Yeah.
What would you tell a 20-year-old Adam?
Ooh, the only bit of advice I'd have, I wouldn't change much because I think
Yeah.
every experience I had was the one I had to have.
Yes.
Um,
True. Very true.
I think it's very true. And and there's a woman that I know called Jill Hicks, and she's got this mantra that if it was not for da da da, this wouldn't have happened.
True. Oh, that's a good one.
It's a great one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes when it happens to you, you think, I wish that didn't. You even utter the words, "I wish that didn't happen. Why couldn't it be different?" But it always happens for a reason. It always puts you in a better place if you can learn from it. So the only bit of advice I'd have to that 20-year-old is to still have his work ethic, still have his dreams and his goals and his desires, but I'd probably tell him to worry a little bit less. Um,
Yeah.
so because yeah, I probably, worried too much about things, and and I realised in later life that was the anxiety
Yeah.
talking.
I think we've all been guilty of that. We always finish up with a similar question. If you and your wife are sitting on a lovely picnic bench down at Albert Park and there's room for three other people to come and join you,
Yes.
who would you have and why?
Ah, okay. So I'd have Freddie Mercury because I don't have any other musical idols, right?
Hey,
Uh,
it's not a bad one to have.
it's not a bad one to have, and you've seen me do Bohemian. And I was never trying to dress up like Freddie, like a tribute band. I just wanted to deliver his songs and that band's songs with passion. So, but Freddie and I share a very common belief that everything can be bigger and everything can be
Yes.
better and
Yes.
everything can be greater. And so I'd have him because it would just make a fabulous night. Um,
Be a long night.
it'd be a long night. It would be. I definitely have my guru Sri Sri Ravi Shankar there
Mm.
because um, he just taught me so much, and I wouldn't be the person I am without him. He'll be my Sunday salute in the next few weeks. So for those who watch Adam Thompson official, you'll be learning more about him. Um, and the third one,
You can have a fourth if you really need to. We can pull up another stump.
yeah, we probably can. Um, yeah, look, I would think I'd like Mum there,
Yeah.
and I think I'd want Mum there because I never got to converse with her as an adult.
Yeah.
So she'd only remembered me as a kid, and I've only remembered her as a 14-year-old, and
Hmm.
that was when she passed. So to have a dinner party and for to get her to meet my wife Mel and to um, I guess just talk to her as an adult would be one of the greatest gifts. In fact, it's the reason why when I watch Costner's Field of Dreams,
Hmm.
when his dad comes out of the cornfield and he has that. I'm getting quite emotional now.
It's okay.
When he has that moment where he gets to play catch
Yes.
with his dad, right?
Yes.
And there's no one else there, and his
No.
wife's watching on, and just to be able to sing a song to Mum and just to talk with her for an hour would be one of
Gold.
the greatest gifts.
Mate, it would be, I think we've all a little bit on the same side there. We'd all like to be able to do that with one of our parents that have passed. And
Mm.
I think that's absolutely awesome. Look, it's been an absolute brilliant chat with you. I'm pretty sure everyone's going to understand now that there is a very different side to Adam, not just the wild man on stage. There's a heart as big as his performance. That's the best thing I can say about talking to you today. It's been a privilege. I cannot wait to be standing in front of you again when we're gigging, sitting there and just lifting up a cold can going, "G'day, mate, how are you?" Because we are looking forward to, I think the whole country's looking forward to getting back to some live music as soon as we can.
It'll be
Uh,
wonderful, and just hang in there, everybody, because nothing lasts forever, and
yes,
we all know that. So just make the most of wherever you are, and I think that's the only bit of closing advice I can give. It's out of our control, so control the things that you can, and that's your happiness towards the current state, and that's all you can do.
mate. And as I always say at the end of my podcast, have a groovy day.
Thanks, Rob.